Okay, we're live. How you doing today, Travis?
Good, good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for doing the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been trying to get you on for a while. It's been about a year now. Can
Yeah, yeah. I've kind of oscillated. I really stayed away. I kind of
you move the microphone closer?
yep, you bet.
Sorry.
Um, oh, it's kind of bouncing back up here. Okay,
All right.
there we go. Is that better?
Perfect.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I kind of went quiet, went dark there for a little while. Kind of limited the Facebook friends and kind of went a little silent and stayed off of social media for a while. I was probably a little too addicted to social media.
Aren't we
Uh,
all?
yeah, yeah. So, and now since I have my own podcast, I thought it was unfair to not come on yours, and I like your podcast. So,
Well, thank you. I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're somebody that I found really interesting because I didn't know about your story until after I met you, and you told me a little bit about your history and uh, completely changing your lifestyle. Um, But before we get into that, I really want to talk about that. But let's talk about your past. You're obviously from the Lansing area. You're from Holt, right?
Yep.
Born and raised.
Yep, yep. Grew up in Holt and born in 1980. Went to Holt until I graduated, then went to LCC and went to Northwood. But I did that all basically remote. So through LCC, they had a 3+1 program at the time. So I actually didn't even need to go there. I think I went for one weekend to Midland to Northwood, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been here my whole life, and honestly, never really expected that. I expected that I would move at some point to, like most people do, to have to pursue a career somewhere else. Like most of my friends now have had to leave the Michigan area to for better economic opportunities. And I've been really fortunate that I've been able to stay in this area, and then married my amazing wife, Lakin, and she's from the area. She grew up in Lansing, went to Dwight Rich. Then her family moved to DeWitt, and she graduated from DeWitt. So yeah, and we're really fortunate. Also, we've got both sets of grandparents that are right in the Holt and DeWitt area, and then we still have Grandma Bobby Ray that is in DeWitt too.
I've seen
And
you guys post pictures with
yeah,
her. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She is amazing. I just adore her. She's kind of an institution. She worked downtown for a really long time, and she's actually coming over after we're done here for Sunday soup. My wife
Ah,
does at our house for all of October. So we get the whole family together. And now we have a 5-year-old that's going to Hazlitt schools. And actually, as an insane turn of events, I'm actually a trustee of the Hazlitt School Board now.
I've seen that. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, we're really committed to the area and dedicated to trying to see it succeed if we can, and just trying to provide any help that we can. And then my father worked for General Motors,
Mm,
like you do, and my mom is a broker in real estate, and she's been at Real Estate One for a long time. And
well,
yeah, so we're got a lot of deep roots here in the area.
that's very cool. And that's one thing I really appreciated about you. And that's actually kind of how I learned about you and Matt, the co-owner of Saddleback,
Yep.
because you guys were giving away a lot to the community around Thanksgiving last year. And I'm like, what are these guys? Like, who are these guys? So
Oh,
I started
thanks.
doing some research and I'm like, oh, Travis. Okay. And then Matt. And you reached out to me initially about the podcast. You're
Yep.
like, hey man, like I like what you're doing, and I appreciated that. Like I really needed that. And then,
Oh, that means a lot.
but I didn't realize you were the owner of Saddleback at the time, one of
Yeah.
the owners. And I was like, okay, I just kind of blew it off, whatever. Like didn't even think too much about it after that. But then after I reached out to you, I'm like, oh, that's the owner of Saddleback.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting how like you could live in a community and not even really know who some of these business owners are.
Oh,
And
yeah, absolutely.
and so like that's one thing I like by doing this podcast is getting to know some of these people because then you put a face to that business.
Yeah, I think that's something that I try to do a lot too. So we try to connect with as many business owners as
Hmm.
possible, and we really Matt Gillett is just a sweetheart. He's just an amazing guy, and we really believe that the rising tide raises all boats, and we say that over and over again. Well, I really repeat it over and over again, more so than he does. But so we try to help as much as we can. And I know it's not, I'm not trying to be grandiose here. Like
Mhm.
it's a minuscule amount of help. They're the ones that do all the hard work, but we feel that there's too much focus on competition in the area that, um, you know, it, well, let me give an example. It'll often come up like, who is better, Saddleback BBQ or meat barbecue?
Mm.
Meat's been around forever. Meat is amazing. Meat has
It
a
is amazing.
great place, great food. The guy that owns it is great. They have a
I th
great
I
reputation.
think the guy that owns it, his mom lives across the street from me.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, nice,
yeah.
nice. But it's great, and it's just so in our view, it's just very limiting to think who is better. It doesn't matter who's better. Both can succeed. There's no. It's not a zero sum game.
Mm,
If
right,
for one to do well doesn't mean that the other has to be bad.
right.
You can like the brisket at one and, the
Yeah,
mac and cheese at another, or you
right,
can support both. There's
right.
no reason to tear down one because you prefer the other one.
It's like eating pizza too, right? Like you can you could have pizza almost every single day from a different restaurant. It tastes differently, and
Absolutely.
you can appreciate the differences.
Yeah. Well, and to come to food too, that was one of the things that really interested me about food after leaving the tech world was that in the tech world, previously, one of the things we did was hosted websites. So when a customer would call and they were complaining, it was because the website was either up or down.
Hmm,
So it's very binary.
right,
Like we're
right.
either we're doing well because your website is up and running really well, or we're doing poorly because your website is down. With food like pizza, for instance, you can literally let's take actually let's not take pizza, let's take brisket. The brisket is one piece, one slab of meat. It's the pec muscle on the cow, and we cut that up and we serve that to multiple customers. One customer can get one slice and say that it's the best brisket they ever had. Another customer could get the same exact brisket but a different slice and say it's the worst brisket they've ever had, right? Or some person can
Oh
say
man.
I don't want fatty, and then the other person says that I only want fatty, right? So it's very subjective. So when somebody gets into these debates about what's the best pizza, I just kind of roll my eyes. Actually, one of the funny things that Matt and I will sometimes joke about at Saddleback is I'll say, "Well, what is the best hamburger in the world?" We'll ask that to people. What's the best hamburger in the world? And they'll go, "Oh, Chevelle in Chicago, or this local place or something." And I'll say it's McDonald's hamburger. It's the
Mm,
one that sells the most.
that is true.
Right? How can you empirically or, like with facts and data actually
Oh,
say that one is better than the other?
right.
Really, I mean, we're voting with our dollar every single time that we go out and
Yeah.
buy a product. And if you're deciding to buy it billions of times a year globally,
Yeah.
then maybe it's pretty good. But of course, none of us believe that that's the best hamburger in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's the best, obviously, right? I mean, people probably don't actually think that. I think they just think it's cheap, right? That's why.
But how would you
But at that point,
how
does
would
it
you
matter if it's the best?
how would you define best?
Right. Best
Right?
for your price?
That's always just subjective.
It is subjective.
That's why these,
Wow.
constant debates about what's the best food, what's the best restaurant. It's just
Right.
kind of funny to
It's
me.
all subjective.
It's all subjective.
Yeah.
It's all,
Yeah.
and there's another thing, and I can go down this rabbit hole that nobody really cares about. But the other thing is, we kind of we think badly or poorly of McDonald's because every single time we go to McDonald's, whether it's here or in Edinburgh, Scotland, it tastes
Mhm.
exactly the same. You know, really what they're selling is consistency.
Mhm.
And what we're looking for in local restaurants is not consistency. We
Right.
want it to
Right.
be bespoke. We want it to be handmade. We want it to be. So
Right.
that means that it's not always going to taste the same, right?
Yeah.
It has to, right?
I
Because
like the way you think, Travis.
oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad somebody does.
I mean, obviously, you think you work in the restaurant industry, so you kind of think out of the box than most people who are just consumers.
Yeah, well, yeah, I would say, I would say it's kind of frustrating to like my business partner Matt. I think I I tend to I tend to try to be maybe a little contrarian. I
Mhm.
look at things and try to see them a little differently. Maybe I don't know. who knows?
Have you always been that way?
Yeah.
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 Has
Yeah.
that caused problems?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm high on the disagreeable index. And I guess I just enjoy that side of life. I like debating things. I like, you know, what's that statement, or that old adage, um, strong opinions loosely held. You
Mm,
know, the idea
right.
that I have an opinion on things, but I'm willing to change it at any time based on new data and better data.
Right. Right.
And I think that's where some people get too rigid in their thinking.
Mhm.
They're not able to adapt
Yep.
and change their mind, and they feel like I have to defend my old ideas. I
Yep.
don't really feel that loyalty to my old ideas. I have been wrong about so many things. Well, let's take an example. For uh, my entire life growing up until I was 21, I was straight edge. I was a drummer in a punk rock band. A pretty bad punk rock band. No offense to the other people in the band. I didn't take music seriously enough in retrospect. But uh, and I completely changed that when I turned 21 and I started drinking. You know, and so that was a radical change from what I had believed before. And it was really a part of my identity before.
Did you not believe that you should be drinking? Why didn't you drink?
It's actually a funny story. My mom made and she doesn't remember doing this, but she made a statement like, I think I said something like, "Man, and, why do you guys drink?" And she goes, "Oh, you'll drink at some point too." And I said, "No way, I'll never drink." And she's like, if you don't drink, I bet you $1,000 you'll drink at some point." And I actually kind of wrote that down, and I would keep saying it. So, as a kid, I was like, $1,000, that's amazing. So it gave me some goal. And to her credit, she paid it off too.
No way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But that was kind of the first thing. And then, I was big into punk rock. And at that time, this band Minor Threat had this kind of a movement that was against drinking.
Really?
And
Was it like a local band?
no,
Oh.
no. I actually don't know where they were from. And I got into punk rock because my cousin, who was kind of my idol growing up, Ryan Backey, he was into punk rock. So then I followed him, and it kind of gave me an identity. And we're all searching for
Mhm.
something to hold on to and
Yep.
something to believe in, and that was kind of my identity at the time. And then at 21, I just decided, because I'd cut my throat in a hockey skate incident.
Cool.
I nearly died, and I kind of had an epiphany of like, man, I could die without experiencing a lot of the things that other people have experienced, and maybe now I should actually try some of these things instead of judging them without my own personal experience with those things.
What kind of things did you have preconceived ideas of, and then what kind of things did you try? And how did that change your thoughts about them?
I'd say, I mean, I probably had preconceived ideas about everything. I think
Drugs, alcohol, sex, like
everything, politics,
politics,
um,
everything that's divisive.
it, just everything. I was just so opinionated, and I'm still probably too opinionated. Again,
Mm,
that back to that strong opinions loosely held. I I I have this a weakness or a failure in myself where I will hold strong opinions without enough evidence to support those, and especially not enough personal
mm,
experience with them. And I still struggle with that today. So I
wow.
really, really actively try to be skeptical of my own thinking. That's
Well,
something I really try hard
that's
on.
probably something that's really good about you literally doing the year of the opposite, because now like forming your brain. You're trying these things that you wouldn't typically have, which I see why that's such a big deal to you, that you're trying all these different things that you wouldn't typically do.
That's exactly right.
It changes the way you think about it, changes your habits, and changes, I mean, even the things you like to do, I'm sure.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, that was why I really wanted to push it. And then now looking backwards, I went from to 21 with that kind of period. And then I went from 21 to basically 42. So I think I might be living my life in like 21-year seasons. Hopefully I have many seasons.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Now you started drinking at 21.
I did.
What kind of impact did that have on your life? Did that send you down a path that you weren't happy with?
I think it was really good for me. It it made me question. Uh, I was probably no, I was too judgmental. I was too critical of others, and drinking made me realize that, wow, I was really wrong about this. This isn't a terrible thing. You know, it does have negative side effects, but it also has positives. There's no question about it.
It's good for like a social lubricant and hanging out with friends and
Absolutely.
just chilling.
Absolutely. You know, it can be very relaxing. There's no question that it can be used as a tool. That's why it has been
Mhm.
used as a tool
When we
going back
s
so
when
long.
we sit around the podcast, like I've had friends on and we just sit there and drink. That's probably some of the best podcasts. Like just fun. Like as far as like the camaraderie that you have with everybody,
Totally.
it's like you're sitting in a bar just talking, but you're recording it.
Yeah, and how dare I judge somebody else for deciding to do that? And I
Right.
was doing that. And it was just, I look back and regret thinking of how I would do that.
Did you have like negative experiences with people that were alcoholics?
No, I didn't have no, not at all. Not at all. The only negative experience I ever had with alcohol was actually kind of my own doing. I remember it was I don't remember where it was. It was by Kiwanis Park, but I forget whose house it was. Because I didn't drink in high school, I didn't get invited to many parties. I also wasn't a very popular guy. And I remember going to one party and somebody basically kicked me out and said, we're drinking here and you're judging us. And they kicked me out. And,
Well,
I don't, but that kind of reinforced me,
mm,
oh man, these people are bad. And I should say, I'm speaking a little dramatically, like I, most of my friends drank at the time. Like I didn't have any problems with them. It was just something that I was wrong about, you know? I was just wrong about.
yeah. Now, when did you I kinda wanna get into your story a little bit and because you, were one of the owners of, Liquid Web, correct?
Yeah,
And
so let's clear that up. So Liquid Web was an S corporation. So it's difficult to have multiple owners of an S corporation because there's tax implications. So what we did at Liquid Web was I I actually proposed to Matt Hill, the founder of Liquid Web, a program called a phantom equity bonus structure, where essentially I had equity, but it only became real on a liquidity event or a change of ownership.
mhm,
So yes, I was an owner, but when people look at it like most companies, or shouldn't say most companies, but companies that offer equity to their employees are generally structured as what's called a C corporation. We weren't. We were an S corporation. So to do that, we did it as a phantom equity bonus structure. So my equity became real only when we sold the company in 2015.
wow.
So that's
So
something that people sometimes get really
messed up, yeah.
yeah, they like, "Oh, he wasn't actually an owner." Well, that's okay, fine. I don't care. But,
Um,
it still got me, paid.
yeah. Um, what was your roles at Liquid Web? What did you do?
Yeah, we didn't really have titles. So
Okay.
literally, myself and Chris Strand, my very, very close friend, probably my best friend, him and in our view, we really ran the day-to-day operations. But I think our titles were like, I think he was infrastructure director and I was marketing director.
Okay.
But if you asked anybody within the organization, we were the ones that us two ran the company with Greg Hill, Matt's dad, who an incredible guy who was kind of like a controller accountant, but I don't even think he had a title. And then his brother, Jer Hill. So it was kind of us four and Matt. And at that time, Matt had really kind of stepped back from the company. He'd been doing it for a long time, and he moved to Arizona and was living there for the most of the time. But to answer your question more specifically, I did the marketing, sales, and business side of the company, and Chris did the technical and development side of the company. But I mean, it got to a point where Chris actually even gave up his office. He just lived in my office. I mean, every decision we made together,
Wow.
and we grew with Matt and the entire team. Not this obviously was a team effort. We grew the company to 480 employees,
Wow.
about 80 million in revenue, and we sold in 2015 for a lot of money.
Yeah. I think somebody told me that Liquid Web was one of the largest, or is the largest sell in Lansing's history.
I think it is the largest S corporation that's ever sold in Michigan, but
Wow.
I'm not positive on that. But I've said that a few times, and nobody's been able to point out another one. But that
Wow.
is because most companies that sell are C corporations.
All right.
So like there's some like Duo Security, and there are
Hmm.
some large companies that have sold now that are much bigger than that in the billions range, but not many that are S corporations.
Right.
Because generally, basically to get into that, S corporations are what are called pass through entities. So essentially, all of the income of the business is your personal income.
Hmm.
So, like a lot of plumbers, restaurants, HVAC companies, those are generally S corporations.
Right.
And
Yeah.
again, this on the political side, this gets into when people talk about taxation and they say, well, tax the rich. A lot of those people are plumbers that
Right. Right.
it looks like on paper that they're making a lot of money.
Yeah, but it's their business.
It's their
Right.
business, but taxation wise, there's no difference because that all that money just flows through to your personal taxes. So
Right.
when we
Yeah.
talk about the individual tax rate, a lot of times that affects people that are taxed at the S corporation
That
level.
makes sense.
And of course, I'm not an accountant, so whatever. Don't take my word on any of this stuff. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that we were the largest S corporation that sold.
What did you go to school for?
So I believed the guidance counselors in high school, and I went to school for what I loved, which was audio recording and video recording.
Mm,
So my first degree was a associate's degree from LCC for audio video recording. And then when I started working at a company called TechSmith, Bill Hamilton, the owner and founder there, is like a second father to me. I just love that guy. And he gave me so many opportunities there. And he told me, you're not going to get any more raises unless you get a bachelor's degree.
wow.
And he actually paid for it too, because he's
Wow.
he's a mensch. And so I went back to LCC and then got a business degree from Northwood.
Okay. I was wondering how your roles played into, or your skill set, how that played into the marketing at Liquid Web.
Oh,
So,
none. You shouldn't go to school for marketing to learn marketing.
well, it changes so much, right? I
Yeah.
mean, with the internet, marketing's completely different now than it was then.
Yeah, it's very I feel bad for the universities because it's incredibly difficult to educate somebody on marketing because
How do you stay up to date on it?
you just have to do it. You
Yeah.
have to do it. You have to be in the tools. You have to be using them all the time. You have to stay up to date with how everything changes. Yeah, it's something that you have to stay abreast of all the time.
Yeah. Now, when did you guys sell Liquid Web? What year was that?
July 2015.
Wow. And I mean, I imagine that your life changed drastically when you did sell.
It didn't really.
No. As far as like, I mean, because I'll just be honest, you made a
Yeah,
lot of money.
yeah.
You became extremely rich. I'm just curious, what did that, I mean, and I'm sure everybody listening wants to know, like, what is that feeling like? I mean, were you rich before that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been incredibly fortunate. I have
Yeah.
nothing to complain about in this world. Yeah, I mean, I was probably,
So
I
you're
was,
well to do.
yeah, I
So
mean, well, I was making, 250,000 dollars a year before that. So I was doing fine. Money was never an issue. And I had been doing well for a long time before that. And when the sale happened, um, I didn't have any earn out or anything. I just received a big chunk of money into my bank account on that day, the day of the closing. And it did feel great. It felt like I had achieved a goal that I had had for a really long time. Um, I feel I feel silly saying this, but I did want to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. And
that's an
I
awesome
achieved
goal.
that, but it was late. I think it is a bad goal.
Mm,
I think it's you shouldn't be motivated by the money, or I
right,
guess
right.
or maybe it's unpopular to say. I don't know. It's
But the fact that you now, when you cashed out, you didn't have you don't have to worry about anything anymore, right? Like, you don't have to worry about the finance,
Well,
because that's
that part had kinda already happened.
yeah.
I didn't need to worry about money before,
Okay.
because I was, it's hard to spend 200 grand a year, like that
Yeah.
spending was never really the thing that gave me satisfaction. I would suggest that it probably doesn't give anybody satisfaction
But
long term.
I don't know if it's the spending. I think it's just like idea that you don't have to worry about where your money's going to come from, right? Like most people, especially right now with inflation and how crazy things are, people are just barely making it, and just they just know they have to go to work every week because they need the money.
Yeah.
But like knowing that you don't need that money and that you can just literally do whatever you want, and that's no longer a factor in life.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I-
You can literally just do whatever you want.
It was weird because it felt it felt amazing. It felt like I had hit that milestone, but that is exactly what caused all the problems in my health. Was I hit that kind of finish line
Yeah,
and thought, "All right, now I don't need to dress up. Now I don't need to go anywhere.
that's
Now I can sleep in as long as I want. Now I don't have to work out. I don't have to be." I mean, I literally showed up to a meeting with a senator in
I remember you telling me this.
sweatpants. Yeah, black sweatpants and a black sweatshirt. I mean, I would wear a black t-shirt and black sweatpants most days. I
Yeah,
just thought I don't need to impress anybody. I don't need to. And yeah, and that was and I got to do a lot of fun things, and it was great, but I didn't
right.
really, increase my spending all that much. I didn't really get any satisfaction out of spending. I bought a house on a lake because that was something that I wanted since I was a child, and I bought a boat that's probably too expensive and a little opulent, and, I don't know if I used opulent right. Uh, and then I bought a Tesla, but I didn't buy the most expensive Tesla or anything, and honestly, I think that's about all. And then I tried to increase my charitable giving, and I tried to
Mhm.
do some things for some friends and family. But
I mean, one thing I like about you, and I wasn't trying to like get into your personal finances,
no,
but
that's
I
okay.
I like the fact that I really appreciate this about you, that I mean, you literally have like the one of the best success stories that most people like dream of. They come into all this
Oh,
money,
thank
right?
you.
They become these millionaires, and now they don't have to worry about anything. Like my kids talk about it all the time. Dad, if you get big on YouTube, we can go do this, and you don't even have to think about like money. They
Yeah,
say that all the time.
yeah,
So it's like from kids, that's what kids see. They see these YouTubers that it just have all kinds of money and they can
right,
do whatever they want. They don't have to work. They don't have to do anything. They just enjoy life.
right.
I think for a lot of people and for me, including like if I were to come in that kind of money, I would get soft. I think that it would be so easy to not have to worry about the struggles in life, and that you would almost have to create your own issues, your own uh like your own struggles to go through. Like, I mean, whether it's like physical or mental, like putting yourself through hard things in order to stay true to who you are as a person.
I think that you nailed it. I think that's exactly what happened to me. That was the trap that I fell into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't push myself anymore. I didn't, I feel like I let myself down a bit because I didn't translate that opportunity into I didn't capitalize on that opportunity that I had. But I will suggest that one of the things that I observe is that people tend to increase their spending almost exactly the same as their income. So they're always feeling
Mhm.
like they're struggling. I have friends that make, two, $300,000, but they're struggling. They're really struggling. And I just want, like, how is this possible? Like, you make so much money.
Right.
And it's just because if you're increasing your spending and you're trying to keep up with everyone around you, you
Mhm.
will never feel rich.
Right.
If there's that saying, the comparison is the thief of joy or the death of joy.
Mhm.
That is totally, totally true. Let me since I'm speaking too vaguely, my Matt Hill that founded Liquid Web, we were best friends when we were 2 years old. We grew up next door to each other. His father was like a second father when I was growing up. His brother Jer is the reason that I play drums because I looked up to him because he was 4 years older than me. Um, if I compared my life to Matt Hill,
Mhm.
uh, I would always feel inadequate and
Yeah,
like I was way behind. I mean, Matt literally rented his studio in LA to Kanye West.
that's insane.
He was friends with Justin Bieber. You know, he rented his place in Arizona to Katy Perry. You know, I
Wow.
mean, he had a yacht. He had, you know, access to anything that he wanted. You know, I think he literally owns a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. You know, like
Wow.
he owns like the original print of Rick and Morty, like or the
Wow.
R2D2 print. I think like, you know, if I compared my life to my friend Matt Hill,
Mhm.
I would always feel inadequate. But I was really that was one of the things that I was fortunate in is that I never had that. I didn't have that need to spend.
Right.
You know, I think we live in maybe the cheapest house on Lake Lansing.
Wow.
Or it is, you know, at the time when we bought it, it was one of the cheapest houses. And and I'm not saying that as a bragging. It's still expensive. It's
Mhm.
still, you know, but
But
it's not like we were out there just trying to spend money, and it's not like we were getting satisfaction out of the spending. My wife would say I'm very cheap. You know, I'm very frugal.
well, that's one thing you kinda, like, spoke true to that when the first time I met you. We walked into what was the name of the Mayfair's? Is that the
Oh yeah, Mayfair. Yeah,
and, you were eating chili. And I'm like, "This guy's just eating chili
yeah.
at this, like, hole in the wall place in Hazlitt."
Big
I'm like
Mayfair fan. Brett from Mayfair is an amazing guy. Yeah, and I love chili too. Yeah,
yeah, I was like, "Huh, that's interesting." I mean, because, like, oftentimes we get this idea of, like, if you're rich, you eat at these, like, fancy places,
I
and
am probably guilty of that. I mean,
have you been to Bodie's?
oh yeah,
That's my
yeah.
favorite place.
That's great. It's great. Have you been to the one in the Saugatuck, the
I
original?
have not. No, I've been to Grand Rapids, not as good,
Yeah.
but
Oh, man, I love the one in Grand Rapids.
really?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
well, I guess it always depends on when you were there, but the one in Saugatuck is wild because 'cause you're basically eating in this house. So sometimes you'll get seated in this Three Seasons room out front that looks like literally your Three Seasons room growing up. So you're eating this, like, $200 meal in a Three
oh, that's
Seasons room that
hilarious.
costs $200.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious. The one, what I really like about the one here in Lansing is it's so small and intimate. You get this, like and for me, like, when you go to a restaurant like that, and the problem is now I compare every restaurant that's, like, high class to Bodie's here in
Yeah.
Lansing. And so, like, whenever we go, I feel like you're paying for the experience. It's
Yeah.
not just the food, it's the experience that also makes the food taste good.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so when we went to Grand Rapids, I think that was part of the issues. Grand Rapids, like, it's a normal sized restaurant.
Right.
You walk in, there's, like, a lot of people. I
Yeah.
feel like the service isn't as focused on you because there's so many people, and maybe that just affected the way I thought about it, but
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it is beautiful too. That's a
yeah.
really nice restaurant in Grand Rapids.
I
Yeah.
went I also went to, St. Elmo's in
I
Indianapolis.
haven't been there.
It's a good restaurant. We went down for a Bon Jovi concert, and the night before
Wait, really?
yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it was a terrible concert.
Was it?
Yeah, it was terrible. He sucks. Um, he's just getting old and his voice sucks now. And it's sad to see, but
Yeah.
my wife is a huge fan, was a huge fan. And so we went to this Bon Jovi concert, but we also went to St. Elmo's. And the night before Bon Jovi was there. So we're like, oh, cool. It's this, like, high class restaurant. And I compared it to Bodie's. I'm like, this is not as good as Bodie's.
Yeah.
Bodie's wins the stake on this one.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Bodie's is expanding all over the place
They
too.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great.
It's one of my favorite restaurants.
It's great. So we should shout out some of the other ones. Bridge Street Social, Mike Luther,
Where's that at?
in DeWitt,
Okay.
fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. People's Kitchen,
Hmm.
on the east side
I've not
of
been there yet.
Lansing, fantastic. Really, really great. Um, yeah, I mean, there's some good restaurants and, you know, Capital City Barbecue.
Mhm.
We just our friend Greg and I, we just went to Faux 777
Okay.
there in Okemos.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good restaurants here.
I like that, you're somebody that is supportive of all these other restaurants here in Lansing and all these
Absolutely.
other businesses. I think it's important to see how somebody who or, somebody who owns a business is and is successful is willing to help share the wealth a little bit.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Yeah, I just deeply believe it that,
Yeah.
yeah, I think too many people really think of things in zero sum terms. Like
Mm.
if I give you your flowers, that somehow that diminishes me,
Right.
that
Yeah.
by me saying that Bridge Street Social is great, that means that Saddleback BBQ is going to lose customers. I mean, we have literally never experienced that. We've helped Capital City Barbecue, we've helped Coach's Pub, we've helped, Cupie's, anybody that needs help and would allow us to help them, we would try to help, and it's never hurt us in any way. And we really try to encourage other restaurants to do that as well, because we think that it will help the whole community too. We need a rising tide.
Well, and then that also speaks true to what you were saying when I think you told me before you guys paid a lunch or for the lunches for a school district, and then other businesses followed suit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that story is kind of weird. It was during COVID. I was waking up. This was before my news diet, so I was still watching the news, and I see
News
that
diet.
I see that there was a barbecue restaurant in the Flint area that had paid off the student lunch debt in a school district in the area, and I was like, What is student lunch debt? I'd never even heard of that. So I reached out to some friends that are teachers at Holton Mason schools and asked them, what is student lunch debt? Like, I've never heard about this. And do you guys have it there? And they explained it to me. It's when a kid, um, maybe they don't have enough money on their card. The school never refuses the meal, but they will kind of accumulate a balance for the parent to pay off later. And those balances can accumulate, and then they pay them off at some other point. And so I was like, wow, I'd never heard of that. Reached out to Holt as the place that I graduated from, and they didn't have any student lunch debt. So reached out to Mason. The principal or superintendent responded in a little while, said it was like $1,500. So I just said, okay, I'm going to come out and bring a check just to pay it off myself. And I reached out to Matt Gillett because he actually graduated from Mason and was a star soccer player there. And he said, wait, like I want in, I want to help out with this. And why don't we do it through Saddleback? And so I went out there with a check from Saddleback now. And like the teachers were coming out and saying thank you and like hugging me. And
Wow.
I had no idea. And they're like, this actually has a huge impact on parents and kids here. And this means a lot. And I was wow. So then they took a picture of me, gave me a bulldog mask, and it kind of went viral. And then we're
Wow.
like, yeah, okay, this is what we did. And we said, if anybody else wants to do it, here's how you can do it. And then Spear Electric, I think, out there in DeWitt was the first one to say, hey, we want in. How do we do this? Darren Hunt out at a restaurant up in is it Big Boy or I feel so terrible because I always get his restaurant name wrong. But he stepped up and he did one, and then a bunch of the community. I think we ended up paying off the student lunch debt at like 8 school districts in the area,
Wow. That's
and it
insane.
was amazing. And the reason I'm glad you brought that up is because that was what we were that was the thing that we were hoping for, was the
Hmm.
idea that we could influence others to step up and do that as well.
Right. It's a small cost.
Yeah, yeah, it was a very small cost. Yeah,
Yeah. And
and it
it
was
had a
great.
profound impact on the community.
I was surprised at how many parents reached out and said and told us stories about how, like, this has been hanging over their head for a long time, and
Wow.
it was a big help. I mean, I think we heard from like 14 or 15 parents just from the Mason School District that it impacted them specifically, that
Wow.
they'd reached out to us about it.
And that what's crazy about that is like, I mean, some people will obviously be negative and be like, well, they just did it because they want people to think highly of them. But the
Yeah.
thing is, like, now I mean, it's almost like advertisement in a way. Now
Sure.
people respect your business and they're
Totally.
gonna be willing to come to your business and buy from you because you help them out at some point.
100%. 100%. That it's it is not lost on me that this benefits Saddleback Barbecue. There's
Mhm.
there's no question. And we've been completely transparent about that, and we've told everybody about that. But here's the question that I have for those people, is that we know certainly that customers want to support businesses that do good in the community.
Mhm.
That is who they want to support. But then
Yep.
at the same time, these people that are critical of the us giving and talking about it, they don't want us to talk about it. Well, then how are the customers going to know that we're doing good in the community if we
Right.
don't talk about it?
Right.
I mean,
And
there's
then
a conflict
how
there.
does it how does it influence other people to want to also give back to the community?
That's exactly
Because I
right.
mean, it's a chain reaction. Somebody sees that and they're like, "Oh, I could do that."
That's right. I
Yeah.
think back to when I was trying to learn how to be a better parent, when I was getting ready to, now we have a 5-year-old, but you know, it the research kind of suggests that not much of the stuff that we do as parents really has much impact. The best thing that we can do is give them a great example to look up to.
Mhm.
You know, it's not so much the stuff that we're trying to instill, forcefully instill in our children. It's more so, if we show them a good example, that is what they're generally going to emulate.
Right.
So if we
Yeah.
want to raise healthy kids, then be a healthy adult.
Yeah.
If we want to raise a kid that reads a lot, we'll read a lot ourselves. If we want, all these things really work. Well, it's the same thing in business. We want to show an example of how a business can do something where hopefully it helps the business, but it also helps the community.
Right.
And I
Yep.
don't see who it harms. I really I don't see the critics that come out on this. Who is being harmed? Please just answer me that. Who is being harmed by us paying off the student lunch debt in Mason School District? Who's being
Right.
harmed by that?
Right. Nobody.
I don't think so.
Nobody's being harmed. Yeah.
It's silly to me.
It's an ego thing, right? People just don't want to see somebody else doing something positive that benefits somebody else.
It's the zero
Because
sum mentality.
if it was them, they would be tooting their own horn.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what other people would do.
I mean, who does? I mean, yeah, whatever. That's a
Yeah.
whole nother topic.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to get into, you brought up how like your kids see you and emulate the things that you do. They want to be like you. That's the greatest impact that you can have as a parent. And I mean, my son, he's like my little buddy. He's always with me, always wanting to do things that I'm doing. He's always working out when I'm working out, which is something that we've had this gym ever since I think ever since we bought the house.
That's a great gym.
We've had it. Thank you.
Yeah.
We've had that gym, and it's just grown over the years. But that's something that my kids have grown up seeing. So, and they see us using it almost daily. And so now it's a habit for them. It's
Right.
something that it's instilled in them. Like, oh, you need to take care of your health. We need to be active.
Yep.
And so for you, somebody who kind of had like this path of like, I guess, least resistance for a while, and then
Yep.
changing your habits, what kind of impact has that had on your kid and you being a parent?
Wow, that's a great question.
When did
That's a great question. I don't know. I haven't thought about. I hope that it's had a really positive impact. I I haven't thought about that enough. I probably should think about that more. What one of the things that I about a year and a half ago, I started rating myself on like 20 different metrics every day, and one of those metrics is, uh, do I wake up and see my son every single day? And you know, before, I would sleep in and I would miss him waking up. And my wife really took on that responsibility, and I missed out on that. And I wouldn't say that I was neglectful. I think people can follow my social media to see how much I
Mhm.
hang out with my kid. It's a lot. I probably overshare that. And then we were also, I guess, fortunate during COVID, where we were just together because the daycares were closed, and we spent a lot of time at the parks, and so we spent a ton of time together. But yeah, he probably wasn't learning great. He wasn't seeing a great example from me before the change. He probably wasn't.
I mean, I don't, and the thing is, like, I'm sure, like, as being a parent, it's probably difficult to admit that you were kind of being neglectful in that aspect. Like that, the fact that you weren't there, you probably feel like you weren't there, but he probably will recognize the change that you made and be like, "Well, my dad used to do this." If even if he
Maybe.
remembers, he's 5.
Yeah,
So,
it might be too a little too, I hope he's a little too young. And the other thing, we're so fortunate to have, I mean, Lakin and I don't have to raise Lane at all because he's got so many grandparents and he's the only grandkid on both sides.
Wow.
So any
Lucky
day,
kid.
yeah, I mean, he gets, oh man, he said something yesterday. I wish I could remember it exactly, but it was basically like he was going to hang out with his grandma and he's like, yeah, I get to watch everything that I want on TV because they don't know my rules. They don't they don't know my rules at all. So yeah, I mean, he's surrounded by so much love. He's got grandparents on all
Yeah.
sides. He's got uncles too, and so I hope that he didn't miss out anything. I hope he was too young. I hope that and I think I'm being probably, and I am very critical of myself. Um, I hope that I'm being too critical of myself.
Mm. Well, I think it's important. I mean, I think he'll see the changes, and that's kind of the point I was getting at. Like with my kids, they've seen this process of like, oh, okay, this is what we do, and
Right.
so him seeing you change your life, and then now it's just a habit, right? Like you just doing the things that you've kind of learned over the last, was it year, 2 years? When did
So it
the
was
year
like
of the opposite start? 2 years ago.
March 2022.
Okay,
Yeah.
and
So
so
coming up on 2 years here. Yeah.
he'll see that you've built these habits, and then hopefully they get instilled in him as well.
Yeah, like, one of the, things that I love is when I'll come in from a run, and he'll go, "Dad, did you get in your 5K today?" And yeah, he gets it now, and,
Yep.
oh, man, you'll love this too. He'll say, "Who's gonna carry the boats and the logs?" From David Goggins, and, yeah, so, yeah, he loves that stuff, and then his uncle Scott he's jacked. He's always worked out. He was a
Very,
former MMA fighter
oh,
too,
wow.
and so he looks up to Scott in that
That's
sense
very
too.
cool.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like I'm all over the place with this interview.
Oh,
Like you're just such an interesting person. So I like we
whoa,
touch
thank you.
here, we touch here, but I kind of want to get into what led into the year of the opposite. And obviously, you just did not have healthy lifestyle habits or anything.
Yeah.
But what was the defining factors for you to do the year of the opposite?
My friend Joe St. Clair died in February of 2022. He died of alcoholism, had a heart attack. I struggled with some guilt because we never really, I never really confronted him and told him how I felt. And I hadn't had anybody close to me die that wasn't kind of natural causes or like old age.
Mhm.
So it was a new thing for me. It sent me into depression for the first time. And then 5 months after that, Matt Hill, my friend since I was two, and the founder of Liquid Web, he passed away and had a heart attack, and we didn't know why because the autopsy took 6 months in LA. And then 10 days after that, Lakin's cousin, my wife's cousin, Tyler Blakesley, who was a teacher in town, and just a great guy and a band guy and somebody that I loved his bands even before I knew Lakin. He got hit by a door in Grand Rapids and died tragically. And it just sent me into this tailspin of feeling really depressed and sad. And I just kept waking up sad. And I'm a big fan of Seinfeld. And there's an episode where George does the opposite of everything. And I also came across this YouTube video of a general that was talking about, well, if you want to change your life, just start by making your bed. So I just decided, all right, I wasn't waking up early before this. I'm going to wake up early. I'm going to make the bed, and I'm just going to start doing the opposite of what I've been doing. If every day I keep waking up sad, there's no logical reason for it. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously I had grief, but there's no logical reason in the sense that, like you said, like my financial stuff is taken care of. I'm surrounded by a lot of love. There's no logical reason for me to be depressed. Well, let's change some things. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results.
I
You
love
got
that
to
quote.
change that. Yeah. And so I just started doing the opposite and started with waking up. That's then I'm like, well, I've never been able to floss, and every 6 months, the hygienist beats me up about it. So let's start there, and then, well, let's see if I can do a 7 minute workout. Well, let's see if we can give up drinking for a while, and then it just led to let's see if I can do this for a whole year, and it worked. Within 5 months, I had completely cured my depression. Uh, I, I forget exactly how long it was, but before I was on medication for high blood pressure, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, and I think it was like 6 months, maybe a little bit longer. My doctors cleared me to get off of everything, and I was on those for like 8 or 9 years. So
Wow.
it was a long time, and
You're
I
so young too.
yeah. Yeah, and it was all lifestyle induced. I mean, we do have a bit of history in our family
Mhm.
of it, but it wasn't that. I mean, it was just I was lethargic. I was living a life of comfort, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's easy to do when you have the need or the ability to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's kind of the default path, you know?
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah, yeah,
If you can, yeah, if you can just eat whatever you want and not even really think about it and drink whenever you want and not have to worry about going to work on Monday and you can drink on Monday night, why not?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it got bad.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, I think about it, like, if I were in your position, where would I be? And I probably would be in the same spot because,
I don't know,
um
you are very disciplined. You have a
thanks.
different I mean, it's I look up to your discipline and how you push yourself, and I don't know, I don't think so. I don't think you'd have that same problem.
Maybe not now, but if I was younger, maybe a couple of years ago, I probably would've because now, like, if I don't work out for a few days, I feel like a piece of shit. I'm like, "Oh, man, like, what am I doing with my life?"
Absolutely. Yeah, right, right,
But
absolutely.
that's the thing about discipline, though. It's all mental. I mean, if you can push it and I equate it to running. So, like, I have a friend who was trained he runs all these half marathons all the time. And I'm like, "Dude, just run a full marathon." Like, he's never run a full marathon, but he's done half marathons all year long. Like, every
Really?
month he'll do 1 half marathon, which is impressive.
Wow,
But, like an official, half marathon, like
wow.
an actual race. Um, it's impressive, but I'm like, "Dude, if you can do a half marathon, you can run a full marathon. Because once you learn how to run 10 miles, then you can run for however long." I mean, yes, it's all mental at that point. It really is.
Hmm.
And I know that because I did a 50-mile ultra run,
Yeah, that was amazing.
and, I also did a marathon, and so the thing is, like, once you get past the training portion, once you get past of being in running shape, then you can just run. It's all mental.
I have to take your word for that because I haven't done that yet.
Who's gonna carry the boats?
I know I've only done the half marathon I think the furthest that I've run is 15 miles.
Okay.
That's as far as I've gone. So
I mean, the thing is too is like you got to take into account like diet, like what are you eating before you run, that's going to fuel you for the run, and then also having things with you that you can take like gels and whatnot, because
I
your
don't know.
body will cramp up and all that stuff too.
Wow, yeah, I don't know anything about that. And actually, in a couple of weeks, I'm heading out to West Virginia. One of our friends, Matt and Alyssa is running 100-mile run out in is it 2 or 3 Rivers Gorge? I forget. And so we're
Wow.
heading out there, and she gave me the honor of asking if I would pace her. So I'm doing 8
Wow.
to 10 miles pacing her in a couple of weeks.
Very cool.
So that's gonna be cool. But she's doing the 100-miler.
That's an
Wild.
ultra run.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, she's shooting for like 25 hours or something like that. I think she has 36 hours to complete it in or something.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah, and I think there's like a 2,500-foot elevation change.
Oh my gosh.
That's kind of scaring me. So that's why like I did my 4 miles today. I'm trying to
Mhm.
train up because I'm worried that I mean, she's super fast. She did the Boston Marathon last year
Wow.
and she's doing it again.
That's cool.
And I don't really run with people or the races, like
Mhm.
competitive races, don't really give me energy. I really just like running because the mental, you know, uh, challenging myself kind of thing.
But that's the thing I like about running. Like if you do a marathon or something, you're not really racing with like against people. You're racing against yourself.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. This last marathon I did was was my first actual marathon, like official marathon, and it was a lot harder than I had trained for. But towards the end, it was a lot harder than I anticipated.
Mm.
My body was cramping up. But the thing is there was a lady that was in front of me, and I knew that if I could keep pace with her the whole time, I'll be fine because like I was pretty much running the same speed. Well, then we got to an aid station and I caught up with her. And so now we're running side by side and we're just talking. The last 2 miles, we just talked the whole time. I got her whole life story within like a 2-mile run.
Yeah.
And it was something that like there was a sense of camaraderie, But like every time you run around, it doesn't matter. People are cheering for you because they're like, they just want to see you do good. So it's
Yeah,
not like you're competing against all these other people. You're competing with each other against yourself.
that's cool. I gotta do one. I've done
I
the
highly recommend you do.
Yeah, I've done the autumn classic around the
Okay.
lake, and then I'm doing the 5K. Playmakers has one up at Uncle John's,
Oh
so I'm gonna
yeah.
do that one. And then oh yeah, Ellie's race. Oh, that's why I wore this too. So Ellie's Place, I'm on the board of, and this is one of the best nonprofits in the area. They are dedicated to the idea that no child should grieve alone. So
Mm,
a kid that loses a parent, they give them a place to come and share their experience with others and talk about it in a safe space with people that have went through it before and
wow.
counselors, and they get to do 1 day a week and they go for a long time. And Ellie's Place right now is serving like 250 individuals in the Lansing area,
Wow.
and
There's that
they're
many
just
kids that lose their parents.
oh my yeah, it's
Is there
I
ages
believe it's
for it?
8,000 a year in just in the greater Lansing area.
Wow.
And so I believe, don't quote me on these numbers, but I believe we serve about 2,000 a year, and we're trying to get up to the full 2,000 that we can.
Wow. And you said you're on the board for it?
Yes, I am.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great honor. Great honor.
That is awesome. That's crazy. I didn't realize that.
It is. It, you should come out with me sometime and tour the place. This
Yeah, I would love to.
facility that they have made is amazing,
Is
and
that near Sparrow?
it's kind of by Capital City Barbecue.
Okay.
Actually, it's out there on Saginaw,
Okay.
by the old hospital that was on Saginaw. I forget
Okay.
what it's called now.
Yeah.
I think it used to be Ingham Regional. Is that
Yeah,
right?
something like
Maybe?
that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
But
I'd love to check that place out.
yeah, please come out, especially with your story and everything. It was it was amazing. I mean, it's got all these big pillows and it's just great. And they serve kids of different ages too. So I mean, some of these kids are really young and they're dealing with this loss, and then some of them are in high school and middle school and they're
That's so
dealing with
sad.
this, and they don't have, they can't talk to it to other kids at school because they don't get
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And so this gives them a space to come in and talk to people that have went through this exact same or a very similar experience, maybe 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And they too may have went through the Ellie's Place experience, and now they get to share that experience with somebody that's going through it. And it helps. I think it helps both sides too, where they can talk to somebody else that understands what they're going through.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that's actually a beautiful thing because, I was in foster care,
Yeah.
and when I went into foster care, it's like experiencing a loss of a parent. And so I was a mama's boy, and when I was taken away, I didn't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And so now I don't have this parent that I was so dependent on, and now I have to learn this whole new environment. So I felt like I lost, like, had the sense of loss. And I don't know if it's equivalent to knowing that somebody died. I've never experienced a parent dying, but I mean, I would assume it's similar as a kid
I,
when you don't have that
yeah,
parent there anymore.
for sure.
And something like that, I think I could have benefited from tremendously.
Yeah, and who knows about comparisons, but I think in some ways it could be, even more challenging. Who knows about comparisons? Who
Right.
even cares about
No, it's
comparisons?
just the
But
idea that you lose a parent.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And your story is just so inspirational of what you've been able to overcome. And so thanks for doing this, and thanks for sharing your story with others. And
absolutely.
it's very similar to what Ellie's Place does, right? You're
Yeah,
you're telling your story and you're allowing other people to tell their story so that they feel like they're not alone.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
they
Yeah, and
know.
that's the important thing about, I mean, trauma is so bad. I mean, it's terrible for people to go through, and especially as a young person, because you can allow a moment like that when somebody dies to define your whole future. I mean, that one incident can literally change how a young person views the world and their future,
Definitely,
how they're going to where they're going to go in life.
definitely.
I mean, and that's one thing that, um, I've always purposely tried to do the opposite of, which is kind of funny.
Yeah,
But
right,
I was, I was always told because you're in foster care, you're never going to make anything of yourself. Literally, I was told that from my adopted mom that you're never going to make anything of yourself. You're going to be a piece of shit for the rest of your life. And so I'd always try to do the opposite because I didn't want her to be right.
right.
But like for a lot of people, their circumstances when they're given those circumstances, they fall into this cycle of life, and then they end up in jail, or they end up in drugs, and because of the trauma they went through,
I
and they don't have
certainly.
the mental fortitude to just like get themselves out of it.
Right.
And so if they can have the help at a very young age, I think that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah. When I one of the activities that they do at Ellie's place, they give them a mask, and apparently this is an activity that they've done, in other places too, but they give a mask and they say on the outside of the mask, um, put words or draw pictures of what you're showing to everybody else. And then on the inside, show what it's like actually inside your own brain, what you're going through. And I picked up one, and on the outside, it was, beautiful and happy and sun and, sunshine. And on the inside, it was just dark rain
Oh
clouds.
my
And
gosh.
I just broke down crying. Like I just can't imagine. And it was a second grader that had
Oh
done that,
wow.
and I just couldn't even imagine. And then they they write these letters and hang them on the wall. And one of the little girls had written a letter that said, uh, "Mom, I hate you for dying on me." You
Oh,
know, it's just
that's
what
so.
do you
And
I
then
mean,
think,
that place, I am so ashamed that I knew the name Ellie's Place. We had
yeah.
catered for Ellie's Place. I didn't know what they actually did
Wow.
until Christine reached out and asked me to join the board um, because of my friend. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name right now. That actually suggested or asked me to be on the board. But yeah, I'm ashamed that I didn't know because that organization is amazing, absolutely amazing.
Oh.
And they're for anybody that's looking to donate. One of the things that I really look at is there's a tool called Charity Explorer where you can see how efficient
Mm.
a charity actually spends their money and
Oh
deploys
wow.
it. They're incredibly, incredibly efficient. When you donate money to Ellie's Place, it is going to programming. It is actually going to help people.
Wow.
It's not just going to bloated CEO salaries and
Right. Right.
advertising and all that kind of
Houses.
stuff. Yeah, it's not. It's not. It's so incredibly capital efficient.
That's
It's
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we can wrap this up here soon. We're over an hour in, but
I
um,
got I got as long as you want.
all right, let's go for another hour.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I had a girl on. Her name's Katie. I can't remember her last name. Anyway, she's a like a life coach, or like a coach now,
Oh, nice.
and like a healing trauma coach. And one thing that she came on, told her story, and actually her sister came on too, and I'll talk about her in a second. But she came on to share about how her mom committed suicide, and they found her. And so she was like, I think in middle school or like elementary school or something like that. And she talked about the impacts of that. And so like sometimes it's not just like what it's like to lose a parent, it's also the circumstances around it too, because now you're wondering as a child, like, why did she do this? Did she do it because she hated me? Like, why? And it can ruin your life. Like, she talked about how, it put her on this spiral effect for the rest of her adulthood until like the last few years where she.
Of course. I mean, of course it would. That's
Yeah.
just God. It's terrible.
And then her sister, Jennifer, she started I think it's a nonprofit. It's called I can't remember. Positive Somebody. I think it's a nonprofit where they put together these care packages for kids. I think that actually lost a parent, or maybe they're going through trauma, and they work through schools. So they go to all the local schools in the area, and they give them these bags of stuff that help them. Like, I don't know if they have like fidget spinners and some like rocks, and that have like quotes on them, and all these different things that help with like trauma healing. So
Hmm.
yeah,
That's awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome that they do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm. Crazy.
Yeah. Um, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
Tell me your story.
Oh boy, my whole story,
Give me the
the rundown.
well, I want people to know what you went through and why you do and why it's called Rising Above.
Mm, okay. Um, so I grew up in Florida. My dad is my biological dad is a illegal immigrant. Met my mom, she got pregnant, and then had my brother. He's a year older than me, and then had me a year later. He was extremely abusive to my mom and like almost killed her at one point. So she left him, met my stepdad.
Were you seeing the abuse?
Uh, I don't know. See, and that's the thing. That's a weird thing about the mind because I was like 3, I think, when we left him. And so like I remember things, but I also don't know if it's like implanted memories.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So like I've heard things throughout the years and I don't know if it's just something that I've pictured and then
Yeah.
now I have that memory now.
Yeah.
But like what had happened, I think that almost killed her was that um she was I don't know what they were fighting about, but he grabbed her by the hair and he was like dragging her down the street in a car. Like he was in the car and she was outside of the car
Oh my God.
and she ended up in the hospital and almost died. And so after that, she left him. Um, but then she met my stepdad, and he was extremely abusive to my brother Michael, beat him from the back of his neck all the way down to his ankles. And he was black and blue. He
Was
skips.
it from the neck so that it wouldn't be seen? Is it
No, he was just angry. My brother Michael and I were fighting. We had like bunk beds, and he wanted to sleep on the top. I wanted to sleep on the bottom, whatever it
as
was.
kids do?
Yeah. And so we were fighting, and he went in there because we were fighting and just started beating him. And that's the thing about my brother. He would always take the blame for things. So I didn't get beat.
Wow.
And we talk about that in the very first episode of the podcast. And so he took the beating and it just happened to be on his back. And so he missed school for a few weeks and then
A
finally
few weeks.
yeah, he was black and blue for weeks. And finally a friend of the family was like, "You need to report this to the police." Told my mom, "You need to report this to the police. If you don't, I'm going to and they're going to take your kids." And so my mom went and reported it, and they were like, "Yeah, if you don't leave him now, we're gonna arrest him tonight. If you don't leave him now and go like where you have family, stay with your family, we're gonna take your kids too." So we had family in Michigan, and so that night we packed up the van. She had $400 to her name and 4 kids, 2 under 5. My brother was I think 2 or 3, and my sister was a newborn and my brother Michael was 9, I was 8. And so we came to Michigan and didn't really have anywhere to stay. We lived in a homeless shelter in Fowler near St. John's. Eventually got kicked out of there. I'm assuming because my mom wasn't making any headway. She had 4 kids, and I don't know how much resources she had that could help her, like get a job and daycare and all that stuff. But I don't know. So then we were homeless because we got kicked out. Came to Lansing. We were eating at the homeless shelter every single night. That was our only meal every day. And the Red Cross put us up in a hotel that is no longer there. It's like it was near down by the towers downtown. And my brother Michael and I started going to school in Lansing. Also, that school, Moores River Elementary or whatever. I think it's now closed. But yeah, we went to school there, and again, we were homeless. We couldn't eat anything all day until we went to the homeless shelter every night. And that's the funny thing. I tell this all the time, but it was funny, like going to the homeless shelter and seeing all these homeless people, like shaggy beards, like raggedy clothes, and you're like thinking, man, these people are so unfortunate. Meanwhile, there's this young mom out there with 4 kids, and that's probably one of the most like unfortunate situations.
Yeah.
But I was a kid. I just thought it was adventurous, and like I've always kind of been that kind of
Didn't know anything
yeah,
different.
didn't know anything
Yeah.
different. Like this is life.
Right.
And so I didn't even really like consider how stressful that could be on her because I couldn't even imagine being in that position like now with kids. I mean, she was 28 years old when she lost us, and I'm 30, so I can't even imagine like what kind of impact that would have on me. Um, so after doing that for like a month, social services showed up, pulled my brother and I out of school, and we went into foster care that night. And I just remember thinking like, I don't know what's going to happen, scared, just had no idea. Um, Met our new foster parents. I was placed in a home with my brother Joseph, my younger brother, and we lived out in Charlotte, and so that's where I grew up until I was 17. But that's also a whole nother part of the story because the home that I grew up in was extremely abusive. That was my foster home, and then they chose to adopt us after that. But they only wanted my adopted mom only wanted to adopt us. My dad didn't want to adopt us. He didn't want to adopt anybody because he knew how bad the situation was in the house, and he didn't want us to have to grow up in that situation. He also talks about that he was on the podcast too. But I was told that we were only adopted because my adopted mom wanted my brother, and so she had to adopt us both in order to get him. And so um, she had told me, several times, she's like, if you say you don't want to be adopted, then they're going to place you somewhere else in a different home away from him. And so it kind of like put the fear in me that like I need to just say I need to be adopted so that I'm with him so I can protect him.
Mhm.
And so yeah, then we were adopted, and then that's when things got terrible. She was extremely abusive. She was abusive before that, but it just got way worse. Physically, my adopted dad ended up calling the police on her at one point, and she was arrested for abusing me. She had kicked me in the stomach and then threw me into a refrigerator. Um, and then that kind of behavior just continued until I was like 17. I started dating a girl, and they didn't approve of her at all. We grew up in church, and so like obviously like marital sex and all that stuff is like a no no. And and that's the thing too. Like going to church, it was like kind of like my refuge away from all of that stuff. Every time I went to church, like I was involved in like the orchestra. I played trumpet. So I was in the orchestra, I was in the choir. I was getting ready to do a sermon. I was like learning how to preach so that it was like a youth service.
Hmm.
And every year the youth would put on a whole service, like the music, they would control everything. And I was going to do the preaching. And then I started dating this girl, and they didn't approve, and they went and told the church that I was having premarital sex. And so they kicked me out of everything that I was doing. They told me I couldn't do it anymore.
Oh man.
And so from that point on, I'm like, well, what's the purpose of coming to church? I mean, this is my escape from life. And so I just stopped going. I would wake up every Sunday before everybody else got up, and I would just go to work. I worked at McDonald's at the time. I was still in high school, and so I would just go to work, and it didn't matter if I actually had to work or not. I would just go there, and I had a laptop that my girlfriend's dad bought me for school because that was another thing. I wasn't allowed to use the computer at home. I wasn't allowed to do my laundry. I wasn't allowed to do anything there anymore. And I would get locked out till 11 o'clock at night every single night.
You
My
get locked out.
Locked out of the house. My dad was on second shift, and my mom didn't want to deal with me anymore. And that's the thing. Like I say, she didn't want to deal with me. Like I was causing problems. I wasn't causing any problems. I was literally just living life and like doing my thing, like as a teenager, normal teenager things. And yeah, she I don't know, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I would get locked out of the house every single night.
Jeez.
And um, so yeah, I would, my girlfriend's dad bought me this laptop to do my schoolwork on. I would go to McDonald's, do school, and then, or if I had work, if I had to work. And then eventually it just got worse and worse. I could do less and less at the house. And because I wasn't given in to not being able to date this girl, I really loved her. And it was my first girlfriend. And so eventually one night I was at her house, and I was waiting to go home, and my friend called me, and he's like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm at my girlfriend's house." Explained to him the situation, and he's like, you don't need to live like that." He's like, "Come live with me." He's like, "We'll take care of you." He's like, "Let me check with my mom first, but we'll take care of you." And so he calls me back, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, we'll take care of you. Like, come live with us. I'll come get you right now." And
Wow.
so I went home. I literally grabbed just a basket of clothes and my school books and like my laptop and a couple other things. And I just started walking up the stairs, left everything else, pictures, like everything. And my dad had just gotten home, and he's like, "Hey, where are you going?" And I was like, I'm leaving." He's like, "Where?" I'm like, I'm moving out. I'm done." And I should also say that I was so stressed out at this point. I had bald spots in the back of my head, like that were like quarter size. I had 3 of them. They were giant. And um and he's like, "Well, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out." And then I left. And I didn't go back for a long time. I didn't talk to anybody. 2 months after moving out, my hair grew back. I was a lot less stressed and scared. Didn't know what life would have in store for me. I thought at that moment, I remember that night when I moved out, I was laying in my friend's bed, And I just cried because I'm like, they're going to be right about how I'm going to make nothing of myself. And
Right.
this is it. But
You've
this,
internalized all those
yeah,
things that you've been told for so long.
right. And
Yeah.
so eventually I just, I was like, I'm not going to allow that to happen. And so it's just been a constant grind of like trying to get better jobs. And that's the thing too. Like I wanted to go at that time, I wanted to go to be a preacher at I was going to go to a Christian college and become a preacher. Like that's what I really wanted to do. But then that whole thing, I was like, well, that's not going to happen now.
Mhm.
And so I never even went to college. Um, and I figured I would never make anything of myself. I would just be working these dead end jobs and who knows what. Like I figured I'd just scrape by, and that's what I did for a long time. I had girlfriends, moms that helped me out. Like one of my girlfriends' mom, she was an administrator at a nursing home in Charlotte, and she made decent money, and so she would pay my bills for me. And I just remember her telling me like, if you ever get a chance, pay it forward. And so that's always stuck with me. And so now I pay it forward because I'm in a lot better situation now than I ever could imagine.
Yeah.
And so, um, I don't know, it's just like that whole process, that all that trauma, all the things that I've gone through and the things that I was told that I couldn't be, I've always became. I've become extremely disciplined. Most people are not disciplined today. I mean, especially today, life is so easy.
Mhm.
And it's so easy to just say I don't want to do something, but you got to do it anyways.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've always tried to break down those barriers. If there was something that I couldn't do, I just did it. And I think that's played into my discipline a lot. Um, and then it's kind of like doing the year of the opposite, like you do something that you don't typically do, but you're gonna do it anyways and you achieve it. And
Yeah. That's actually absolutely right.
so, like for me, life has been like this constant battle of just things going bad, it seems like situations in life where it could ruin your life essentially. Like you could allow the situations you've gone through to ruin your life. And, one of the latest things that happened to me as an adult was I ended up that first girlfriend, I ended up getting her pregnant and didn't realize it. Didn't know until the kid was 3 years old. And I had kind of assumed it was a possibility, um, just because we were together and she was dating somebody else. But I didn't know until he was 3. Her mom ended up, or she ended up doing a DNA test on him. I bought the test, gave it to her, and she did it on the kid, the grandma, and it came back that he was 99.999% mine. And so I hired a lawyer to try to establish paternity rights. But in Michigan, you have till the kid is 3 years old to find out to establish paternity rights. It's a law.
Wow.
And because there's already an established father in his life who's paying child support, who's been involved in his life, they didn't want to interrupt that. So the judge was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do." And so he was like, "I want to grant it in your favor." He's like, "But I can't."
Wow.
Yeah. So so
Wow.
then that was like something else that just sent me spiraling. And then I had a friend who committed suicide right after that. And I ended up like I was in a bad spot mentally. And I was probably like
What, yeah,
20,
when was this?
I
Yeah.
was probably like 24 or something like that.
Okay.
Um I'm trying to think. My son was born. He was born in 2017. So it might have been 2018 when it happened.
Okay.
And so I started going to therapy, and I've never been one to do therapy. I hated therapy. But it helped me. Just talk
That's
therapy,
great.
just talking with somebody, and then working out is a huge thing for me
Yeah.
because if I don't work out, that defines my mental state. And so,
Yeah, me too now.
yeah. And so and then that's the thing too. Doing hard things defines defines you as a person. It defines the way you handle situations. It defines the way you look at situations. It defines how you feel about situations. And so I just started diving into things that I wouldn't typically do, kind of like doing the opposite of everything, but
Yep.
I not necessarily everything.
Yeah.
So I did that ultra 50-mile ultra, and it was one of the hardest things that I could ever do. Training for it was hard. Doing the race was hard. I didn't even finish the race. I was out running on these hills in like this off road trail for 7 hours, over 7 hours. And it was during COVID, so it wasn't an actual official race. I mean, it was official, but you could do it wherever. It was like
Yep. Right.
so, I did it on the trail that it was supposed to be at, and I had never run that course before, and it was brutal. It was a off-road biking trail, and it was like almost mountainous terrain. It was crazy. So training around here could not have prepared me for that. But that makes me concerned for you running with that your friend.
Yeah, makes me concerned too.
But uh it was off road, and I even lost all my toenails
Really?
running that. Yeah, all of them. They all fell off. And
Like while you were doing it or after?
after, yeah. Yeah, they all fell off. But it was one of that's the thing. It was one of the hardest things that I could have ever done. And that's where the thought of starting a podcast came from. Um,
Gotcha.
this was 2020. I had started the podcast in January of 21. And so I had been talking with my wife previously, like as I was going through the training process, and I'm like thinking about like everything I've gone through. How can I help people tell my story? Because I've always wanted to write a book. I've always wanted my story to be out there, but I never had the time to write a book. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of dedication, and obviously that's something that I could do. That's just limiting. I'm limiting myself.
Yeah, right.
Um, but I'm like, how can I? What is the most efficient way to get my story out there? I'm like, it would be to do a podcast. And so I've never been one to just barely, like, hardly do something or like half-ass something. So I'm like, if I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to do it right. So I bought all the equipment. I'm like, I'm going to have a studio. Like I'm going to have a Joe Rogan setup. And so that's what I did. I bought all that stuff, and it's kind of a good thing that I did because it's forced me to have to use the use the equipment, use the studio, because my wife was not going to be happy if I didn't.
Right.
So it's something that I've constantly been doing ever since, and it's definitely changed. The process has changed, but and gotten better, I hope.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a great setup here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
Is
yeah,
the speaking to other people that are, rising above too, has that helped you and find that there are other people that are going through similar things and
I
build a network?
absolutely. People's story, and that's the thing. Like, it's so. I was telling somebody the other day on a podcast. It's so easy to just be like, "Oh, I have another podcast. Like, I got to talk to somebody else." It's so easy to just do that. Like it's just another person. But the thing is, that person's story is so important to them. You have to like sit there and make their story the most important thing that you're putting out there.
Mhm.
It's the only thing that matters in that moment. And so like sitting down with somebody and having them share their story is a huge honor for me because I'm like that person's willing to come here and tell me their story.
Right.
There's nothing special about me. I didn't go to college. I didn't get a degree in any of this stuff. I just figured out how to do it. And I'm not even great at it. I just do it. And that's the thing. And
What episode is this? How many have you done?
this is 159.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I've actually done more. I have a lot more to release. I've been recording almost every day.
Oh, right, because of the
Yeah,
strike.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, it's something that I enjoy doing, and I enjoy having a platform for people to come on and share their personal stories because that's something I felt, and that's one thing I wanted this podcast to be when I started. I wanted it to be a platform for anybody to just come on and share their story regardless of what it was. And because I felt that I didn't have that, like I didn't have a way to share my story. And I just so desperately wanted people to know because you don't have to let your circumstances define who you are
Mhm.
and you can rise above. And so to answer your question about the name, I was at work one day and I'm like sitting there thinking, texting my wife, and I'm like, what could I call the podcast? Like, I'm giving her all these different names. She's like, no, I don't like that. I don't like that. And so I'm just thinking about like everything I've gone through. How did I get through it? And like what was that process? I was like, well, I rose above it. Like, rising above with David Hess.
Nice.
Like that works, I guess. And she's like, yeah, I like that. It's really nice. But
Yeah. That's great, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So and it's been a journey. I mean, my whole life, I don't it sounds so sad. And I've shared it on other podcasts. I've shared it on my brother's podcast. And people always say, like, I don't know how you can not hate those people. I don't know
Right.
how you can like go through life and not be angry
Are
or
you still in touch with them?
yeah. So my adopted dad, him and I have a great relationship now.
Really?
Yeah. He actually got me the job at GM.
Does he
Uh,
remember saying, "Don't let the door hit the" in
he
the
he does. And I talked about it on a podcast like a year ago. And I try not to tell it too much anymore because it hurts him
Yeah.
to hear that he did that and how it had an impact on me. But he texted me randomly one day and he's like, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, I am really sorry about that." And
That had to mean a lot to you.
yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, like, I should make that clear too, because him and I had a bad relationship. But then even up until when I started working at GM, we were still kind of hashing things out. This was over 10 years ago. I've worked at GM for 10 years. Um, him and I we were on third shift, and we would meet up before work and sit in the parking lot waiting for our shift to start. And we would just talk about everything going on. And um, he apologized over and over and over and over again. He realized like he should have done more. And a lot of the things that happened in the home wasn't necessarily on him. It's just the fact that he didn't necessarily do what he should have done to prevent the things that were happening.
And this was your foster father, right?
Yes,
Not your biological father.
correct.
And what about your biological father and your biological mother?
So that's another part of the story too of rising above. So when I turned 18, I couldn't have any contact with my mom until then. The last time I had seen my dad was I was 3 or 4 years old.
You couldn't have any contact?
No.
Why
So
is that?
when you go into the foster care system, the court, I think, restricts how the parent can engage with the kids. So like for instance, if I were to have like programs at school, like if I was in a school choir or something, or band, because I was in band, my mom couldn't come to those events unless it was like negotiated with like the system, like the court system or whatever.
Wow.
So, and that's another thing.
Is that the idea because, well, there's abuse here, so we don't want the child to be exposed to it?
I don't know. I don't know. It could be the case, but my mom wasn't abusive. But I don't know. That's a whole nother story.
But she was abusive, right? Wasn't that for?
She wasn't abusive. My adopted dad was.
Oh, okay.
Or not adopted dad, my stepdad. Sorry.
Okay. Okay.
And
okay,
that's my son.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
And so, Max, we're in an episode. Stop. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. Oh. We have been going a while, huh?
An hour and 26 minutes. Yeah. What was I talking about?
Oh, we were just talking about the adopted. I thought that the biological mother was abusive.
Oh yeah. So my biological mom wasn't. It was my adopted mom.
Okay, gotcha.
And so so when I went into foster care, my biological mom wasn't allowed to have anything to do with us.
Right. So it was your biological mother's boyfriend was the one that was
husband.
Yep. Okay. And then he was the one, that was the reason you were removed.
Correct.
Okay.
He's the reason why we moved to Michigan.
Okay. All right.
And he was arrested in Florida.
Okay.
And then we were placed in foster care. And then when you're placed in foster care, your reaction or your relationship with your parents are limited. You can't like go do things with them. And it's all based on what the court allows too. Like sometimes when you're in foster care, you can have weekends. Like you can go stay the weekend at your actual parents' house, or go on outings or whatever. Or sometimes they're supervised. With us, it was never that. We never had that. We would always have to go to St. Vincent's here in Lansing, and then we would have a monitored hour session with my mom.
Really?
Once a week.
Wow. How was that? I mean, that seems
it's
like
hard.
Yeah, you're just forcing in your whole time with your mother for that 1 hour
with 4 kids.
4 kids.
And that's a thing too. And I talk about this a lot because I don't think the system, at least my mom's system, the system that we had, I don't think it was set up fairly. Because like, how can you be a parent in 1 hour? And then they want you to demonstrate in that hour that you can be a good parent. But how are you going to manage 4 kids that are just so excited to see you? They're crazy. They want you to keep them calm and quiet. And they didn't want her to give us snacks. Like,
oh, and it's supervised too.
It's supervised. Somebody's like watching outside of a door, so you know you're being watched, and it's I don't know. It's a hard situation, right. And I get why they would do it because some people are just abusive and they got to keep an eye on them. But I don't know. It was hard. It was hard as a kid, knowing I could only see my mom for 1 hour once a week, and
where are your biological mother and father now?
So when I turned 18, I put all my time. I had a job at the nursing home that my girlfriend's mom worked at, and it was safety sitting. They called it safety sitting. So I'd watch this resident I would just sit in a chair and watch him, make sure he didn't fall and whatever. And I worked the night shift, so I would just sit there on a laptop or on a tablet, and I Just started searching the internet one day for names, and this was like back in 2012 or 13. And so it was a lot more like data wasn't as much. There wasn't as much data out there at that time, especially for somebody who wasn't necessarily on the internet that much. And so I just started searching names that I knew of, that I knew. And I came across some court records from Florida, with my mom and my stepdad. And then I found my aunt, who lived in Michigan when we went into foster care, but then she had moved to Virginia. And I'm like, this kind of looks like what my aunt looked like. I don't know if it's her. So I just sent a message to her, and I'm like, hey, my name's David. I'm looking for my mom. This is her name. If you know her, let me know. If not, then I'm sorry to bother you. And then she sent me a message, and she's like, oh my gosh, we've been looking for you forever. Like, so happy to see, like meet you. And she put me in contact with my mom that day. And then we eventually met up with her, but we kind of have a relationship now, but she still lives in Michigan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what about your father?
So my biological dad, he was deported back to Honduras when I was like 3 or 4, came back illegally. Um, and I think he's been back here since '07. He still lives in Florida, but with him, I did a 23andMe. My wife bought me a 23andMe for my birthday. I think it was like that year that everything was going bad for me, and I just wanted to know. I wanted to know like my history. I couldn't answer any health questions when I went to a doctor.
Right.
I
Yeah.
couldn't give him
Medical
any.
history.
No,
Yeah.
I couldn't give him anything. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know, and so I wanted to know, and so I did the 23andMe, got the health thing, and then I had a ping for my second cousin on my dad's side, like popped up on 23andMe. It's like, you have a new relative,
Wow.
and she had just done 23andMe, and so I contacted her. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for my dad. This is his name. Do you know anything about him? And she's like, that's my mom's side of the family's last name. I can talk to her and see if she knows anything. She talks to her, calls me the next day. She's like, I need your number. I need to talk to you. She talks to me. She's like, we know where your dad is, and he's been looking for you for over 20 years. And yeah, so then they put me in contact with him, and I ended up going down to Florida that year, my whole family, and we met the whole family and everything. And my so her mom is my first cousin. Um, and so I was able to meet her. I drove down to South Carolina, that's where they live, and I met their whole family, and then drove down to Florida and met my dad. And
Wow.
yeah, and he's been up a couple times since, but
Really?
yeah.
Does he have other kids now?
Yes, yeah, he has a whole family in Honduras, and then he had 2 sons in Florida.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're older
Got a
than
lot of
us.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
typical Hispanic family.
Yeah. I'm kind of jealous. I didn't. I want a lot of kids now.
Really?
I do.
You could have more.
Yeah. I'm hoping.
Yeah?
My fingers crossed.
Do you think you could ever adopt?
We've thought about it.
Yeah.
We haven't went down the process of educating ourselves about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's definitely a possibility. Lakin and I have talked about it many times.
I
We
think you
definitely consider it.
I think you could do it. I mean, you're a real compassionate and, like, thought out person, and you care about people.
I appreciate you saying
So
that.
I think if you do choose to do that, I think that some young person, some young child could benefit greatly from it.
I appreciate you saying that. Do you stay in touch with the foster system is something I'm very ignorant about.
Mm.
I don't even know how it works. I don't know. Like, are you in? You've availed yourself of all these resources with the St. Vincent's and the foster system. Like, are you now that you're established, and are you in touch with them, or do you know kind of what's going on and know what's the issues that are going on with the foster system? And
I know that one of their greatest issues is that they don't have resources. And it's hard. I had a lady on the other day, and she was she was a social worker here in Lansing, and she was saying that one of the biggest things is resources, and also they get burned out so quickly, and because they don't have resources, they have this huge caseload of all these different kids and paperwork, and then they also got to do the field work, and it's so stressful, and so the turnover rate for them is extremely high. And so, I personally don't have anything to do with the foster care system. I by doing this podcast, I wanted to actually talk to people that work in the foster care
Yeah,
system,
you should.
and I've reached out to people, and they won't do the podcast because it's such a close. And this is a thing. Like most foster care agencies get bad rep. Their news coverage on them are not good. I mean,
Oh,
typically it has to do with abuse, neglect, and like usually they didn't do something correctly, and so now the news coverage on them is not good. And so they're a little bit more reluctant to do interviews, and because they're most people want to get this like I gotcha moment, but
right.
really I just want to learn about it.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, it's actually changed a lot from when I was in. The way they've changed things are a little bit more fair to like the parents and give them more opportunities. Whereas like my mom didn't feel like she had opportunities, and she also didn't feel like she was being treated fairly.
Really?
Yeah,
Does your mom feel like you were taken from her?
she feels that she recognizes that like she couldn't provide like a decent life for us, and that we needed better. That the lives that we did end up having, like is proud that we had those opportunities. Um, I think what she didn't like was that she felt like she was being ganged up on.
Mm.
Um, because my
Her
adopted
against the system kind of thing?
it's her against my adopted mom, and then also the caseworker.
Okay.
She felt that they were just looking for reasons to not like help her out and to make the situation even more difficult.
Mm.
And eventually it led to her just signing off her rights as a parent.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha. Wow.
but I think I honestly, I mean, that's one of those systems that I think you need good people in that system. Like you need people, especially for foster care parents and like people that want to adopt. You need people that are passionate about it. You need people that do it for the right reasons and people that care genuinely. Because the problem with that system is people do it for the money.
Ah,
And I mean, you end up with there's scenarios where people have like dozens of foster kids, just and they're collecting these checks, and these foster kids are living in these terrible situations.
really?
Yeah, yeah. There's a podcast and stories on YouTube about it, and it's horrific, the different stories out there.
It's a whole area that I've been so ignorant about. I
Yeah.
just don't know.
It's it it's one of those systems too. It's like it it's so easy to bash a system, right? It's so easy to be like, well, they did this wrong, they did that wrong.
Right.
But it's also one of those systems too, is like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a
Like
very, very complicated issue.
it is.
I mean, you don't want to put a kid in a bad situation.
Yeah.
You don't want to pull them away from their biological parents.
Yeah.
It's yeah, you don't want to give them access to the foster kids, to see their biological parents and then have it result in
Right.
something bad happening.
Right.
Yeah,
But
it's
in the same sense, this is in the we can wrap this up, but this is what my issue with the foster care system was, and this is what I wanted to talk about on the podcast. And I wanted to interview people because I want them to kind of set the record straight with me and like explain to me like why did this happen, or why, like how can you prevent something like this from happening. And for me, all the abuse that happened in the home when I was adopted, it was reported. After I moved out, I found out that over 20 people called CPS and reported the abuse going on. Neighbors called. They have police records of
this was when you were in the foster system?
this is when I was in and then after I was adopted.
Wow.
People from the church called to report the abuse, over 20 people. And they came out like 2 or 3 times to investigate, and they didn't even know about my mom going to jail for abusing me. And she still had a license to be a foster parent and still had kids in the home, for foster kids in the home. And so I called social services and I was like, she went to jail for abusing me and you guys are doing nothing. And so they came out and they investigated it. They asked her, I was there when they came, and they asked her, they're like, did you go to jail for abusing a child? And she was like, I did, but how did you find out about that? And they're like, well, somebody reported it. And their response to this whole thing was, if it happens again, we'll take your license. And then they left. And then we remained in the home. And then so at that point, I felt like I had no hope.
My
And that's
yeah.
why I ended up moving out.
Wow.
And so that's my issue with the foster care system, because I feel like there's more protection for the adopted parents because they don't have and or not adoptive parents, but for the foster parents, because there's not enough resources. There's not enough people that do it. It's stressful. And so they protect those people more than they're willing to protect the people that actually had their kids taken away.
Right. And yeah, I can see, trying to understand where they're coming from is that, if they don't have anywhere else to put you, they could, well, we have no options here.
Right.
There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
It's like the least worst option.
Right.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah,
Terrible.
it's terrible. And so I've actually reached out to like the director of St. Vincent's and no response.
Really.
You know, I have a friend that is a social worker for Bethany Child Services in Grand Rapids, and she can't come on. She's like, I can't because of she's like, I would love to. She's like, but I can't because we can't do media things. They've been told that they cannot do any media presences or
Yeah,
interviews or anything.
I understand that. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Man, that's tough.
yeah.
Tough. Well, thanks for sharing that and
Yep,
educating me a bit on the foster system.
absolutely.
Yeah, you
Yeah. I
should
mean,
get involved with that.
I've thought about it. I'm limited on time, but I would really like to give back to that system.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, your perspective would be so important to be heard and be and I think, I'd suggest it might be beneficial for you too to see how terribly complicated all of these decisions are.
mm,
That's one of the things that in the only, 10 days or so that I've been on the school board, people will criticize school boards
yeah.
so harshly, especially during COVID,
Mhm.
and now, as with everything, being the person that actually has to make the very difficult decision and weighing all of the bad options,
Yep.
things are very, very complicated. And then sometimes, by being a part of the process, it can show you and give you a kind of a peek behind to understand, wow, these things are way more complicated and difficult
Right.
decisions to make.
Yep.
And it gives you a respect for the people that made the decisions before and understanding that, man, it's tough. It's
Mhm.
really tough. A lot of times you are choosing the least worst option.
Right.
You don't have a good option. It's just which one is the least worst.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
you would be so good as a part of that system.
I've thought about it. Yeah, it's I did think about that at one point. It's just I'm so busy.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I
But
hear
I
you.
try to do my part by sharing other people's stories, and I've had other people on that were in the foster care system that also share their stories, and I hope that by me doing something like this and having those kind of people on, that their stories actually do help change the system in a weird way, you know? Because if somebody hears their story, they may be like, "Well, I don't like that. What can we do to change that?"
Yeah. Well, let me give you the speech that somebody gave me a long time ago. Uh, this democracy is fragile, and it all of these organizations and boards that we have are the ones that govern, and it's the people that show up and participate that are the ones that are they're taking a sacrifice in order to be a part of the system. In most cases, they're not getting anything
In return.
in return at all.
Right.
But if you see it as a duty as a citizen to be a part of it, I served on the zoning board of appeals. I've done in East Lansing. Now I'm doing the school board. Been involved in a citizen journalism nonprofit. Obviously Ellie's Place, and I do that because some mentors told me that this is your duty as a citizen, that you need to give back. I'm not saying need, I'm not
Right.
broadcasting this to you. I am not
In general.
qualified to give advice, but I feel like more citizens need to step up. And I say this to my friends all the time and be a part of it because it is so beneficial for you to see firsthand how the decisions are actually being made.
Mhm.
Because it's easy to think, wow, this group, this board that I don't really know, they're making a decision because they're all self-serving and
Right.
they're all, they have these agendas and there's these conspiracies. And
Right.
it turns out that a lot of the times you can you can see that they're very complicated things
Mhm.
that they're in my experience, everyone is really trying to do their best
Right.
and they're
Yeah.
really trying to give back. And when you see that firsthand and you're the one that, you have to read, for instance, let me make this more real since I'm speaking too vague. Uh, Monday, I was appointed to the school board and they shook my hand and said, "Hey, can you be here Thursday? Because we have to hear an expulsion."
Oh, boy.
I didn't even know that school boards were the ones that had to adjudicate the expulsions, or the expelling a kid. And once you are a part of that process, you realize that this is very difficult. My name is on one of these board meeting
Mm,
minutes that is Travis Stoliker moved to basically expel this kid.
yeah.
That's my name that's on there. I had to look at the mom, the kid, and their attorney and the dad and be
Oh,
a part of that process, and that's something that somebody on the outside could look at it and go, you know, how dare they do this? I can't believe that they would do this.
they're a kid.
Yeah, but
Right.
when you're there and you have to weigh all of these terrible choices and you have to decide between the least worst
Hmm.
choice, it's different, and it gives you a respect for all those people that have dedicated their time to
Right.
to be a part of the system and make the whole system work.
Right.
All of these boards are usually asking for people and begging for people to join and serve, and they're just looking for good people. And your experience would be so invaluable as a part of, St. Vincent's or the foster system or any of these organizations that are in that ecosystem, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. You should really consider it when you have enough time.
I should consider it. That's the thing. Like, I mean, I try not to be as critical on them as I was when I first started the podcast. When I first started the podcast, I had no idea of like how intricate the system was and like what goes into again making these choices and um but like everybody's situation is different. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so like you said, it's so easy to talk negatively about something without really knowing the process. And so I try not to talk negative without being like, well, but you know, maybe they were doing their best.
Have you ever the Man in the Arena?
It sounds familiar.
Have you ever
It's a book, right?
it's let me see if I can find it. Oh shoot, I actually whoa, it's like a bomb shelter down here. I can't it's only doing SOS.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's is it Dwight D. Eisenhower, I think it is. But he essentially says that, no credit should be given to the critic. The person that just diminishes what somebody else is doing.
Theodore
Is it Roosevelt? Yeah, it's
Roosevelt, yeah.
Roosevelt.
Yep.
My memory has been terrible this one, podcast. But it actually hangs on the wall of my son,
Oh,
and he just says that it's the man in the arena, man or woman in the arena that is the one that counts. It's the one that's actually there doing it. It's the doer of deeds, the one that's
mhm.
doing the work. That's where the credit should be given. It's the one that tries repeatedly and fails and fails and fails,
Yeah.
and then only later, tastes success. That's the one that counts. It's not the one that's just tearing down from the sidelines.
Right, right.
And I think one of the things that's happened with social media, especially, is that now it's so easy to criticize everything,
Mhm.
and but you shouldn't give any credit for that.
No.
It's the person that's actually doing the work.
Yep.
That's the person that gets the credit.
Absolutely.
It's the people that show up for the board seats. It's the ones that show up and do the work.
Yep.
Give them the credit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's something that I've witnessed personally with the podcast is, you put an episode out and somebody might not like it. But they're just criticizing the idea.
Yeah, you've
They're
had a couple of those. So you
yeah.
had a
I just had another one too.
what was the recent one?
It was a city council guy.
Oh, what happened with that one?
I don't even know. So it was for Ward 1 here in Lansing. His name's Michael Vandegucci or whatever.
Is he running or is
He's
he actually
running.
on it now?
He's running. So
Okay.
he's running against Ryan Cost or
Okay.
Coast, however you say his name.
Okay.
But in the last episode we did, which I just released, we talked about a late incident that happened with Ryan, who was arrested 10 years ago and for a hit and run in Eaton County, and then didn't pay any of his fines until like he was questioned by the city Pulse. The city Pulse and the Lansing State Journal did a background check, and they questioned him about it when they found out. and he lied. He straight up lied to him. And then he went and set up a payment arrangement after he was questioned. And then they came back and they're like, I thought you didn't know about it. And they're like, he's like, well, I knew about it, but I didn't think I owed that money because I spent a year in jail, whatever. So, anyways, I released this episode. We just read the article on the podcast, and people hated me for it. Like, and this is a thing. I'm like, this is a fact. This is something that happened. And he's
Yeah.
running for a political position. Wouldn't you want to know about that?
Right.
And they're like, it just seems like a bashing session. Like you're just bashing. I'm like, it's just fact. It's something that happened. Like it's not my ward. I don't really care. But like
Yeah.
if I had to vote for this guy, I would want to know these things.
Right.
And so yeah, that was the latest incident
Oh,
where
man. Well, I know how much that hurts when
no,
that
I don't.
happens.
It doesn't bother me anymore. But when it first happened,
Good for you.
I had Ryan Kelly on the podcast, and that's when you reached out to me
Yeah.
to like just tell me to keep my head up and whatever.
Yeah.
That at first it's so easy to just allow the general public to, when they don't like something, to like kind of beat you down, and you can't allow that to happen. But
But it's easier said than done.
it is. But that's the thing. If I was anybody else, like if I wasn't as confident as I am in who I am as a person, it might have defeated me.
Right.
It might have been enough for me to be like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, certainly.
But having some people reach out and tell me like, hey man, like I appreciate that. Even if you don't like the interview, don't like the person, you don't have to. Just
We need to be adults where when we don't like something, we just look the other way.
right.
We just don't tune in.
Yeah.
We don't need to be to the point where well, I don't like that you say that. So also you shouldn't be allowed to say that.
Right. Yeah.
And that is why I didn't come on the podcast for so long, was I didn't want, I'd went through a few of those experiences too. And I'm a pretty emotional guy, and it got to me. And luckily I've kind of developed a bit of a thicker skin, I
Mhm.
hope, and that's why I agreed to come on.
I think I mean, by doing hard things and like, I mean, obviously you run all the time, you've changed your physical appearance, you've changed so many things about you mentally. It changes your confidence level and who you are as a person and the way you handle situations like that.
Yeah, it does.
Because if I was, like I had mentioned, anybody else, if I wasn't confident in myself, like, so for me, working out builds confidence. It makes me feel good about myself. It makes me
Definitely.
feel like I'm a strong person.
Yep.
And so that also affects my mental state of being. So if I'm not working out, my mental state of being, mental strength is not there. And
Right.
so if I were to go through that situation in any other circumstance, that, like I said, it probably would have defeated me as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. Yeah. What is that saying? Like the swallow the frog first, like get the thing out of the way, do the thing you don't want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I felt that today. Woke up, had a great time with my wife in the morning, and then went out and did my run, and then immediately jumped in the lake. It's 44 degrees out, and the lake is like 52.
Oh yeah.
And that cold plunge, it just wakes me up.
Yeah.
It gets me going. And then drove here, and the whole ride here, I was just ready to go. The colors were changing. I think it's peak color here in
Yeah.
Lansing. It was beautiful. If I would have done what I did 2 years ago and, kind of got up, turned on the TV, hung out in bed for a while, probably was nursing a bit of a hangover from the night before since it's Sunday, yeah, I would not be as fired up and motivated and ready to go as I feel right now.
Yeah.
That discipline. There was either Serena or Venus Williams had one that said, discipline is freedom.
It is.
Man,
Yeah.
I love that. And then discipline is destiny, Ryan Holiday. I totally agree with that. And it's so counterintuitive for me, because that is not what I thought after selling the company. I was like, no, freedom is going to be nobody gets to tell me what to do. I go where I want to do. I wear what I want. I don't have to do anything. Turns out I had it exactly wrong.
You're captive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You're captive to your mind.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. And exercise is so good for the mind, or my mind at least.
Yeah. Everybody's mind.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that exercise doesn't necessarily cure, but it helps tremendously with mental illness and mental like depression and anxiety.
I believe that there was Australia has just started. Basically, they prescribe exercise before they prescribe other
Oh,
things.
that's
But
so
I
awesome.
might be getting that wrong, and I'm sure, and just to be clear, the pharmaceutical industry, that's amazing what they've done, and they're incredibly helpful tools. And so I'm not disparaging or diminishing any
Yep.
of that, but if I was, I would start with exercise first.
Yep.
See if you can fix that, and then the breathing, which for me, there's been some studies showing that breathing it can change your mental state.
Mhm.
And what I use exercise for is a way to trick me into deep breathing.
Mm.
You can't really work out vigorously without breathing deeply,
Right. I seen that you recently went and did hot yoga, and,
Yeah, yeah.
I love hot yoga.
That
I
was brand new for me.
I love it, but that's one thing that it forces you to do is breathe and take a moment to just, like, especially after the workout and you're just sitting there
Yeah,
focused and you're tired, you're exhausted, and then now all you're focused on is recouping and just breathing.
absolutely. Yeah, that was great.
The
That was
first
great.
the first time I went to East Lansing Hot Yoga.
That's where we went.
The
Yep.
first time I had, I hallucinated. So, like, we did the workout, and then I think it was, like, an hour and a half, and then I'm laying on the mat, the guy's doing the guided meditation thing, and I hallucinated. I felt like I was on a beach. I could feel the sand, and I could hear the waves crashing,
That's
and
amazing.
I could feel the sun. Obviously, it's hot in there, but I
Yeah.
could feel the sun, and it just felt amazing. Then I snapped out of it. I'm like, "I wanna go back." That
I
was
didn't have
awesome.
that. Now I want to go back.
But you can get yourself into a hallucinative state by breathing.
Absolutely.
You really can.
There's a guy, I forget the name. It's Train the Brain LLC, I think it is. It's out of the Metro Detroit area
Oh.
where he's licensed to train the Wim Hof breathing method, and
Oh,
it's like a 4-hour thing, and he does them all over the state, and
okay.
I think I'm gonna do that too. I'll let you know
Yeah,
when I do.
that's
Maybe
cool.
you'll join.
Yeah. Yeah, let
Uh,
me know.
all right, cool.
All right, Travis. Well, thanks for doing the podcast. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, same, buddy.
Wanna do
Thank
it
you.
again?
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you.